Bath, England, July 1946, 09:12 hours. Steam drifts across the platform like gauze over a wound. 11 Japanese women stand behind the yellow line, motionless except for the tremor of breath. The sign above reads, Bath Spa. A clipboard clicks, ink scratches. The gate is open. No rifles wait. No barbed wire. Only a civilian car, its black paint shining in the sun, idling beside a curb marked government use. The Women's Auxiliary Corps officer at the barrier, sharp-shouldered, eyes steady, looks up from her list. "Good morning, Miss Sato. Bath will be kind to you today." Aiko Sato tightens her fingers around a thin paper permit stamped POW, female civilian category. Her pulse knocks beneath the cuff of her borrowed coat. The reflection in the window shows the face from the reference image, fine-boned, dark hair hidden under a khaki cap, exhaustion softening every line. Somewhere behind her, another woman coughs. Another whispers a prayer. The train exhales one last plume of steam and pulls away, leaving silence that feels deliberate. Captain Margaret Sinclair consults her watch. 1,700 hours back at this station, she says. Maps and a pound note each. Spend them as you please. You'll find the city polite if curious Aiko opens the small cloth purse. The pound note smells of ink and unfamiliar hope. For months she had dreamed of open gates only to wake to fences. Now the dream stands breathing in front of her. If it is mercy, it is a kind she has never met. If it is deception, it is the gentlest trap in history. She steps through the gate. Bath waits in sunlight. Stone facades the color of honey, rows of flower boxes spilling scarlet geraniums, streets scrubbed clean of the war's grime. Civilians move with the calm rhythm of people rebuilding their lives. Aiko expects them to stare, to spit, to remember Burma. Instead, a woman with a pram smiles faintly as she passes, as though politeness were armor strong enough to keep history at bay. Reina Takahashi, the youngest of the group, whispers, "They look at us. Why do they look kindly?" Aiko shakes her head. "Maybe they don't see us yet." The car follows them only as escort. No one carries a weapon. Corporal Sarah Bell, barely older than Reina, acts like a guide on holiday. "You'll want to see the Abbey," she says brightly, still standing. Took a few bombs, but she's proud again. Her accent turns every word into an alien melody, half warmth, half discipline. Aiko listens without answering. In Burma, they had told her the British were monsters, that captured women were shot, or worse. Yet in Dorset, she was given food, a bed, classes in English. Now a stranger is giving her directions to a cathedral. Every act of kindness feels like an interrogation she cannot pass. They cross Pulteney Bridge, where sunlight dances on the river's skin. The women pause. Stone arches curve beneath them like ribs of something ancient and indestructible. Sinclair halts the group. "The Avon," she says. "It carried Roman barges once. History floats differently here." Aiko stares at the calm water. In Burma, rivers had been brown and red, mud, blood, and rain. Here even the current seems civilized. The wind carries the smell of bread and engine oil, not rot or gunpowder. She feels dizzy, as if gravity itself has changed allegiance. A flower cart waits at the corner, stripes of yellow canvas fluttering above buckets of lilies. The vendor, a stout woman with ruddy cheeks, wipes her hands and smiles. "Morning, ducks. Fancy a bloom?" The women freeze. The smile doesn't falter. "Peace lilies," she says. "Half price for guests." Sinclair nods toward Aiko. "Go on." Aiko steps forward. The petals are white, edges bruised with purple. She touches one carefully, expecting rebuke. "How much?" she whispers. The woman waves her off. For peace? Nothing at all. Aiko bows awkwardly, the gesture from another language. When she looks up, the vendor's eyes are wet. They move on in silence, each carrying a flower. Raina clutches hers like a weapon. Kindness is their revenge, she mutters. Then it's working, Aiko answers. At 10:40, they stop at the Rose and Crown tea rooms. The sign creaks in the breeze. Inside, air smells of milk, yeast, and ration era sugar. A waitress approaches, apron starched white. Tea for 12, she asks, as if nothing about this table is unusual. Sinclair nods. If the rations allow. For guests of the Crown, the waitress replies, we'll find enough. Porcelain clinks. Cups are poured. No one speaks. The first sip scalds Aiko's tongue. Black tea, bitter and real. She hasn't tasted anything unsupervised since 1942. Across the table, Natsumi Ueda studies the spoon in her cup as though it might explode. The silence breaks when the waitress returns with a tray of sandwiches. War's done now, she says gently. You're safe here. The sentence lands like artillery. Safe. The word has no translation in the vocabulary Aiko learned in Burma. Safety belonged to other people, yet here it sits on the table between the sugar bowl and the milk jug, undeniable as sunlight. Aiko swallows hard. The tremor in her hand steadies. For the first time in years she realizes her body is reacting not to fear, but to the absence of it. She lifts her head. Through the window, the street outside glows gold. Civilians pass without glancing up. The war feels impossibly distant, like a fever she only now remembers recovering from. When they leave the cafe, the bell over the door rings softly. On the pavement outside, a young boy collides with Aiko, scattering a paper cone of daisies. She kneels before instinct can stop her. The boy hesitates, then grins. "Excuse me, miss." He offers her one of the flowers. "For helping." Aiko freezes. The boy's accent turns miss into Ms., gentle and unburdened. She accepts the flower. "Thank you," she manages. He tips his cap and runs off. She stands slowly, watching him vanish around the corner. The daisy trembles in her fingers. The stem is fragile. The bloom smells of nothing, yet it feels heavier than the pound in her purse. Captain Sinclair calls, "Coach in 5 minutes, ladies." The Holborn Museum, next Aiko, slips the daisy inside her coat pocket, above her heart. The paper rustles around it. The gesture is half superstition, half surrender. As the group gathers at the curb, Raina asks quietly, "Do you think they hate us?" Aiko looks back at the flower seller still waving, at the child's footprints fading in dust. "If they do," she says, "they hide it better than we ever could." The car door opens. The engine hums. Bath's bells begin to ring 11. Clear, unhurried, echoing through streets that smell of coal smoke and forgiveness. The coach rolled forward through the honey-stone arches of Bath, the morning light shifting across windshields and slate roofs. Aiko sat nearest the window, her reflection superimposed on the streets beyond. Two worlds sliding over one another, the survivor and the stranger. Captain Sinclair stood beside the driver, clipboard tucked beneath one arm, describing landmarks in a tone meant to sound casual. Behind her, Corporal Sarah Bell leaned toward the women with a practiced smile. "You'll like the market square," she said. "Smells of bread again since rationing eased. First summer without blackout curtains." The words barely reached Aiko. She was watching pedestrians step off the curbs with groceries and laughter. No checkpoints, no helmets, no banners. Just ordinary life, something she'd stopped believing could still exist. The coach stopped at the corner of Stall Street. "You'll continue on foot from here," Sinclair announced. "Remember, no one's guarding you. but you'll find bath easier if you stay near us." The door hissed open. Warm air rushed in, carrying the scent of coal smoke and bakery sugar. Aiko stepped down first. Cobblestones met the worn soles of her government shoes. The street unfolded. Rows of Georgian buildings patched but proud, flower boxes blazing red against pale stone. Civilians flowed around them, glancing but not glaring. A newspaper boy shouted headlines about reconstruction loans and cricket scores. His voice had no room left for war. Raina whispered, "They look at us as if we're guests," Aiko answered, "or curiosities." Still, no one shouted, no one spat. Aiko waited for the world to correct itself, but politeness held like sunlight. At the market square, a vendor stacked fruit in pyramids, apples bruised but fragrant. Another woman at a flower stall called out, "Lilies for peace, ladies." The phrase jolted Aiko, for peace. The word had been forbidden back home, spoken only by those who surrendered too soon. Sinclair gave a small nod, permitting them. The women hesitated, then edged forward. The vendor smiled, handing each a stem. "Half price for visitors." Aiko touched the cool petal and felt a flicker of unreality. When she reached for her purse, the woman waved her off. "No charge. We've all lost something. Keep it." The bloom trembled in Aiko's fingers, white against khaki cloth. She managed a bow, the only gesture she still trusted. They moved on. Bath's rhythm surrounded them. Clatter of tram wheels, church bells counting the hour, children's shoes slapping the pavement. Every sound carried the same message, normalcy as defiance. Aiko's mind kept replaying the propaganda briefings from Burma. British soldiers laughed while they tortured. British women spat at captives. Each lie now dissolved under the weight of streetlight and human voices. Her stomach tightened with a confusion sharper than fear. They paused outside a bookstore where English titles filled the window. Sarah Bell pointed. "See there? Mr. Davies runs that shop, sold books through every air raid." Her pride was local, unaffected. The women peered through the glass. Aiko's eyes caught the reflection of her own face beside rows of spines labelled "Peace Among Men" and English poems for the end of war. She looked away quickly, as if she'd intruded on someone else's hope. Sinclair scribbled something in her notebook. Observations, perhaps. The British made reports even about mercy. Aiko watched her and wondered if compassion could be bureaucratic. The officer sensed the gaze and said quietly, "Kindness can be policy, but that doesn't make it false." Then she closed the notebook with a soft click, as if to end the argument before it began. By noon, the sun stood high and unforgiving. Sinclair led them down a narrow lane where a wooden sign creaked above a door. The Abbey Café. Inside, shadows cooled the air. Tables were mismatched. Porcelain was chipped but clean. An elderly waitress approached, her hair pinned in careful curls. "Tea for all of you, dears?" she asked, unstartled by the khaki coats. Sinclair nodded, "And bread, if you can spare it." The woman's eyes softened. "War's done now, love. Tea's stronger when shared." She brought steaming cups and thin sandwiches, placing each gently before the women. The gesture, so ordinary, felt ceremonial. Aiko lifted the cup. The saucer rattled against her trembling hand. She tasted the bitterness and nearly wept. Freedom had a flavor, tannic, unfamiliar, impossibly gentle. Across the room, the cafe's gramophone crackled to life with a waltz. For a moment, the women forgot to be careful. Reina laughed under her breath. Natsumi closed her eyes, as if listening from another life. Aiko set her cup down and realized her shoulders had relaxed for the first time since Burma. Safety could ache as much as danger. Sinclair observed them in silence. She saw exhaustion loosening into something else, recognition, maybe even gratitude. She wrote one line in her book and shut it again. Experiment proceeding favorably. Then she looked up and met Aiko's eyes with something less clinical. "You see," she murmured, "civilization survives only if someone behaves as though it does." Aiko wanted to answer, but words in English felt too fragile. She simply nodded, a motion halfway between agreement and prayer. When they stepped back into daylight, the street had grown busier. Church bells marked 1 o'clock. Pigeons scattered from the square. The group turned toward the museum district. The lilies in their hands had begun to droop, their scent fading into the dust of the road. Then it happened, a small blur of motion. A boy racing from the bakery collided with Aiko, his paper cone of flowers bursting across the stones. Petals spun through the air like snow. Instinct overrode caution. She bent to gather them. The boy stared, wide-eyed at her foreign face. She waited for fear or apology. He simply smiled. "Thank you, miss." The word miss, simple, polite, undeserved, lodged in her chest. She pressed one trembling hand against her heart as the boy darted away, leaving laughter in his wake. Reina whispered, "He doesn't know what we are." Aiko shook her head. Maybe that's why he could thank me. The group stood still for a heartbeat too long. Then Sinclair's voice cut gently through the air. "Come along, ladies. The Holborn awaits." The officer's tone carried no triumph, only quiet command. As they walked on, Aiko looked down at the crushed daisies in her palm. Their stems bled green against her skin. The words hit harder than any gunfire, she thought. Not because they wounded, but because they didn't. She slipped the flowers into her pocket beside the lily and followed the others toward the museum, her steps light, uncertain, almost human again. The Holborn Museum rises like a relic of a calmer world. Columns white against the sky, its marble steps spotless despite the dust of a country still rebuilding. The coach stops at the gate. Captain Sinclair steps down first, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, and turns to the women behind her. "This way, please. You'll find this collection less dangerous than anything else you've survived." Her voice carries the faintest trace of humor. No one laughs. Aiko follows the others up the steps. The air smells faintly of polish and rain. She expects the guards, who usually accompany prisoners on outings, but none appear. Inside, the entrance hall opens into a cavern of light and stillness. Vaulted ceilings, oil portraits, a chandelier missing 2 crystals. A sign reads, "Natural History and Fine Art Collection Reopened, 1946. The curator, Mrs. Eleanor Peaton, greets them at the door. Her grey hair is arranged with the precision of habit. Her dress is plain but dignified. "Captain Sinclair tells me you are guests of His Majesty's government," she says. "Welcome." The word guests lands softly like snow. Aiko bows before she can stop herself. "Thank you." Mrs. Peaton continues as though nothing unusual has happened. "We've reopened only 2 galleries so far. Some paintings were kept in the countryside during the Blitz, safe from bombs. You'll see them restored now. Please enjoy quietly." The women disperse like ghosts, uncertain of permission. The first room is filled with landscape paintings, green hills, calm lakes, clouds shaped like memory. Aiko stares at one canvas of rolling meadows. The brushstrokes are soft, forgiving. For a long moment she forgets that art can exist without propaganda. Behind her, Corporal Sarah Bell whispers to Sinclair, "They're looking at everything like it's sacred." "For them it might be," Sinclair replies, voice low but firm. Aiko's footsteps lead her into the second gallery. Portraits, women in silks, soldiers in uniform, faces serene in the permanence of paint. Then she stops. Before her hangs a painting of a woman bathing, bare shoulders, calm expression, water reflecting gold light. It isn't erotic, it's peaceful, a body owned by itself. Her breath catches. She remembers the quarters in Burma, thin walls, the stink of uniforms, the endless line of men taught that her body was state property. Every command that turned skin into duty crashes against this image of quiet autonomy. She feels heat rise behind her eyes and forces it down. Reina touches her sleeve. Aiko-san. Aiko shakes her head. Just tired. But she isn't. She is awake for the first time in years. In the next room, children's drawings line a temporary exhibit wall. Crayon scenes of families, gardens, pets, and skies unscarred by bombers. A small placard reads, "War Children's Exhibition, Hope Through Art." Natsumi stares at a sketch of a dog chasing a ball. "We would have been punished for this," she murmurs in Japanese, "for wasting paper." Sinclair overhears and says, "That's why we teach them early that paper and mercy are never wasted." The line lingers in the air. At the far end of the hall, an elderly woman dressed in black stands with gloved hands folded around her handbag. She watches the group with an expression neither cold nor friendly, simply human. After a long moment she approaches. "I lost my son in Burma," she says quietly. Her accent is soft Southern English. "But I hope you find peace." Someone has to start it. No one answers. The silence feels fragile, as though a single breath could break it. Aiko bows deeply. The woman nods once, then moves on. When the group enters the East Gallery, Aiko lags behind. The walls here are filled with paintings of service, nurses tending wounded men, women carrying stretchers, the uncelebrated labor of endurance. One canvas near the center draws her closer. A nurse kneeling beside a soldier, washing blood from his hands beneath the first light of dawn. The title plate reads, "Mercy at Dawn, 1943. Aiko stands motionless. The colors are muted, gray-blue light over flesh tones and fatigue uniforms. But the gentleness in the nurse's face is unmistakable. She feels her throat tighten. The memory comes unbidden. The night of her capture, a British medic binding her wrist after finding her collapse near a trench, speaking words she didn't understand but whose tone she could never forget. The same quiet, the same restraint, the same refusal to hate. Her vision blurs. She takes a step back, but the floor tilts beneath her. Reina catches her elbow. "Aiko!" "I'm fine," she lies. "It's the light." But Captain Sinclair has already crossed the room. "Miss Sato?" Aiko turns away from the painting. "Why show us this?" she whispers. Sinclair's eyes soften. "Because the war is over, and you are still a woman, not a weapon." The words slice through years of silence. For a moment, Aiko thinks she will collapse, but the ground steadies beneath her feet. Around her, the museum hums with quiet life. The tick of a clock, footsteps, breath. The civilized sounds of a world that remembered how to be gentle. When she looks again at the painting, the nurse seems to be looking back, not pitying, recognizing. Reina moves beside her, whispering, "If they can forgive us, maybe we can forgive ourselves." Aiko can't answer. She can only nod, her hand pressed to her chest where the boy's daisy still rests inside her pocket. Outside the museum, clouds gather over the rooftops. The group descends the steps in silence. Civilians pass, unaware that history is unfolding quietly on these ordinary streets. At the curb, a young boy runs up holding a bundle of garden flowers, marigolds and violets. He looks straight at Aiko. "For you, miss," he says. "Mum says the world's better when ladies smile." She takes the flowers carefully, blinking away tears. "Tell your mother she's right." He grins and runs off, his laughter fading into the hum of the city. Sinclair waits by the coach door, notebook in hand. "Ladies," she says gently, "we'll return to camp before the rain starts." As Aiko climbs the steps, she glances back once more at the museum, the windows glowing gold against the gathering grey. Inside those walls, she'd seen something she could not name, but would never forget. Freedom, she realizes, is not always the opening of a door. Sometimes it is the simple act of being seen without contempt. The coach engine starts. The city slides past the windows. Bridges, spires and streets washed in soft drizzle. Aiko presses the flowers to her chest. For the first time since she can remember, she does not feel like a prisoner at all. Rain begins before they reach the camp road, a fine silver drizzle that softens everything it touches. By the time the coach pulls into Dorset, the sky is an endless sheet of grey. The women disembark quietly, carrying the flowers and silence of Bath with them. For the rest of the evening, no one speaks above a whisper. Aiko sits on her cot, staring at the bouquet of violets and marigolds laid across her folded blanket. Their colour feels defiant against the barrack's dull wood. The day replays in her mind, the museum, the painting, the voice that said, "You are still a woman, not a weapon." The sentence has followed her into dreams and back again. 3 days later, Captain Sinclair appears during morning assembly. "We'll be taking a smaller group back to Bath," she announces. "Museum staff invited us for a closing review before the next exhibition." Volunteers only. 10 hands rise instantly. Aiko's rises last. The following morning, the same coach hums at the gate, slick with rain. The countryside rushes past, drenched and luminous, hedgerows glistening like mirrors. Inside, no one speaks. When Bath emerges from the mist, it feels less like a city and more like memory returning to test its accuracy. At the museum entrance, Mrs. Peton greets them once more. "Welcome back, ladies. We've restored one more wing since your last visit. Some of the paintings survived the worst of the war, others didn't." She gestures toward the East Gallery. "But Mercy at Dawn remains exactly where you left it." The words land like a tremor. The women disperse through the rooms, the echo of footsteps mingling with rain against glass. Aiko walks alone, tracing the familiar route through portraits and landscapes until she reaches the painting. There it is, the nurse kneeling beside the soldier, basin of water glowing with dawn light. The colors seem sharper today, the edges less forgiving. She steps closer until the canvas fills her vision. Her heart hammers once, twice, then breaks its rhythm altogether. The air smells faintly of polish and damp wool. The nurse's face, so calm, so unbearably gentle, undoes something Aiko has kept bound for years. She remembers the sound of boots outside the comfort station, the barked orders, the nights when even silence had edges. She remembers the first British medic who touched her wrist, not to hurt, but to heal the shock of a bandage instead of a blow. Now, staring at this painted woman washing another's wounds, Aiko feels all of it collapse inward. The propaganda, the pride, the shame, the belief that suffering was the only proof of loyalty. Her knees give out. The fall is soft, barely a sound, but it turns heads across the gallery. Sinclair is there in seconds. She kneels beside her, steady hands resting lightly on Aiko's shoulders. "Miss Sato?" Aiko's voice comes fractured, half Japanese, half English. "Why, show me this?" Sinclair's reply is quiet enough to belong to the rain outside. "Because war ends only when someone remembers how to be kind. Because you deserve to see what mercy looks like in daylight, Aiko covers her face. The tears come hot, fast, unbidden. Not the restrained weeping of discipline, but the shaking release of someone realizing she has survived more than death. The other women gather nearby, Reina, Natsumi, the rest, watching in silence. Reina kneels beside her. "If they can forgive us," she whispers, "maybe we can forgive ourselves." Aiko lowers her hands. Her eyes are swollen, her breath unsteady, but the weight inside her chest has changed. It isn't gone, but it no longer crushes her. Sinclair helps her to her feet. "You're all right now?" Aiko nods slowly. "I think I'm beginning to be." They stand before the painting together. In the stillness, the soldier's washed hands gleam faintly, water reflecting the nurse's face. It is not a painting of victory. It is of survival, of two people sharing the impossible act of gentleness after ruin. The gallery clock ticks. The storm outside deepens. Thunder afar echo over the hills. Aiko turns towards Sinclair. "Back home," she says carefully, "we were told mercy was weakness. That pain was duty. Now I see, mercy is the only thing stronger than duty." Sinclair gives a single nod, more acknowledgement than agreement. "The world learns that lesson over and over," she murmurs. "Most of us forget too quickly." For a moment they stand side by side, the officer and the prisoner, two women bound not by chains, but by understanding. When they leave the museum, the rain has stopped. The streets glisten under weak sunlight, reflections of buildings shimmering like ghosts in puddles. At the gate, Mrs. Peaton presses small envelopes into each woman's hands. "From the museum staff," she explains. "Photographs from the exhibit." Something to keep inside Aiko's envelope is a single black and white print, "Mercy at Dawn." The edges are rough, the image faint, but the nurse's face is still visible. She holds it to her chest as they walk toward the coach. Reina hums quietly under her breath, a lullaby from before the war, soft enough that only Aiko hears. Halfway to the bus, a voice calls out. A small boy stands by the fountain, hair damp, clutching another bundle of flowers. He jogs forward, grinning. "Miss," Mum says, "you forgot these last time." He holds out a few wild roses. Aiko takes them, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." "Welcome, miss." He tips his cap, repeating his mother's phrase. "The world's better when ladies smile." Then he runs back the way he came. Aiko watches him vanish into the sunlight, roses trembling in her hands. The simplicity of it. Gratitude, innocence, forgiveness given without asking, hurts more sweetly than any confession could. On the coach ride back to Dorset, no one speaks. The countryside blurs by, green and endless. Aiko traces the outline of the photograph, committing every shadow to memory. She thinks of Sinclair's words, of the painting, of the hands washed clean. By the time the camp gates come into view, the flowers have started to wilt. She doesn't mind. Even fading, they still carry the shape of kindness. That night, Aiko writes by lamplight on thin camp stationery. The words come slowly, her English uncertain but sincere. She begins, "Captain Sinclair, you didn't give me freedom. You gave me the right to believe freedom was possible. The letter will not be sent for years, not until after she's long left the camp. But she keeps rewriting it, as if shaping the sentence can keep Mercy alive a little longer." Autumn arrived early that year. The Dorset air turned thin and cool, curling around the barracks like smoke. The war was over, the treaties signed, but the camp still hummed with quiet order. Repairs to be made, names to be processed, futures to be decided. Aiko folded her blanket one last time, the edges square and perfect. Her suitcase sat at her feet, small, brown, almost empty. Inside were only a few things: the museum photograph, a worn pound note, and the letter she had written and rewritten for months. Outside, trucks rumbled. Another transport was leaving for Southampton, bound for the ships that would take the repatriated back to Japan. Captain Sinclair stood near the gate, reading a list aloud. Some of the women listened with faces lit by longing. Others stared blankly at the gravel. When Sinclair reached Aiko's name, she hesitated. "Miss Sato, have you decided?" Aiko looked at the paper in her hands, the official form offering passage home, a return to a country she no longer recognized. The thought of it felt like an echo she could not answer. "I'd like to stay," she said softly. "If I may." Sinclair nodded once. "You've earned the choice." Aiko signed her name slowly, as if the act itself required permission. "Stay." The word settled on her tongue like warmth. A year later, Aiko was living in Manchester. The city was grey, patient, resilient. Bombed-out shells of buildings had been rebuilt into shops. Trams rang through the morning fog like church bells. She shared a small flat above a bakery, the smell of flour and sugar always in the air. She worked as a translator for the British Control Commission, mostly for returning POW correspondence, German, Japanese, and sometimes Malay. The irony wasn't lost on her. Once she decoded orders that sent men to die, and now she translated letters meant to heal what those deaths destroyed. On her desk stood a small photograph in a wooden frame. Mercy at dawn. The nurse's painted face was fading, but the light in it remained. Above her writing table hung a postcard of the Roman baths in the city that had changed her life. She had bought it from a street stall on her first free day, paying with a coin she'd kept from that visit years before. Each morning she woke before sunrise and walked the quiet streets, the same streets she had once seen from behind a guarded window. The shopkeepers knew her now. The woman at the tea room always greeted her with "Morning, love," as though she had lived there all her life. Sometimes she still dreamed of Burma, thick heat, the smell of diesel, the distant sound of bombers. But when she woke, the sound that replaced it was the clatter of milk carts and the chatter of English sparrows. Raina wrote from Kobe once a year. She was married now, with a daughter. Her letters were careful, hopeful. "People forget quickly here," she wrote. "Maybe that's mercy too." Aiko read each one slowly, translating every word in her mind as though rewriting their shared survival into a new language. At night, she still wrote to Captain Sinclair, though the letters were never posted. The captain had been reassigned to the European Repatriation Office after the camps closed, and later retired to Sussex. Aiko kept every draft stacked neatly in a box under her bed. The latest began, "You once said kindness can be policy, but I think now it was something deeper. It was faith. You believed even our shame could be rewritten into usefulness." In the winter of 1949, Aiko met David Peaton, a young engineer restoring Manchester's tram lines. His aunt, Mrs. Peaton, the museum curator, introduced them with the satisfied smile of a woman who believed the world could be healed through human connection. David was patient, quiet, curious about the world beyond Britain. He listened when she spoke and never asked about Burma. They married 2 years later in a small civil ceremony. Mrs. Peyton insisted on arranging the flowers herself, white lilies, violets, and a single daisy in the bride's bouquet. When Aiko saw it, her breath caught. The same flowers from that first day of freedom, carried now into another kind of peace. After the ceremony, David smiled. "I suppose I owe your captain for bringing you here," he said softly. Aiko looked at him and replied, "She gave me more than that." She taught me how to stay human. They moved into a modest brick house on the edge of Manchester. Aiko planted a small garden behind it, roses, lavender, daisies. She tended them with the same precision she once used to fold uniforms. Each bloom felt like a promise kept to no one in particular, just the world itself. Years passed. The photograph of Mercy at dawn faded almost to grey. The postcard of Bath yellowed at the edges. Aiko kept them side by side in a frame above her writing desk. When her daughter was old enough to ask, she pointed to them and said, "These are the things that taught me what peace looks like." One rainy afternoon, the child asked, "Mama, were you ever a prisoner?" Aiko set down her teacup. "Once," she said, "but they let me walk through their city without chains." Her daughter frowned. "How did that make you free?" Aiko looked toward the window, where rain streaked down the glass in soft, clean lines. "Because I learned that freedom isn't the absence of walls," she said. "It's the choice not to build them again." When she grew old and her hair turned silver, Aiko opened the wooden box and removed her last unsent letter. Her handwriting had grown shaky, but her words were still clear. "Captain Sinclair," she wrote, "you didn't give me freedom. You gave me the right to believe freedom was possible. You showed me that mercy is not a reward, it's a decision. Because of you, I built a life instead of surviving one." She signed her name carefully, Aiko Peton, and placed the letter behind the photograph of Mercy at dawn. It stayed there until the end of her life, a secret testament to the quiet revolution that began with a pound note and a walk through Bath. In the decades that followed, historians wrote about battles, treaties, and generals. They rarely mentioned the women who were given back their dignity one afternoon at a time. But in a small house on a Manchester street, a framed photograph, a faded postcard, and a single line written in blue ink told another story. Empires fall, but mercy endures. The absence of vengeance, that was the real victory. If this story moved you, don't just close it, remember it. Like, comment, and subscribe for more untold histories where mercy outlasts war.